Welcome back to the 12 Days of Bookmas. Today I'm trying something I've never actually done before, painting book edges. I've seen so many beautiful designs out there, but instead of jumping straight into anything complicated, I wanted to start simple and just experiment. I'm going to try painting a solid color edge with acrylic paint, liquid watercolor, and pan watercolor to see what works best, what's the easiest, and whether this is something I'd want to try a more detailed design with in the future. For this experiment, I'm using 3 different paperback books that I got out of a little free library. They're books that had been sitting there for a bit. I'm also going to use acrylic paint, a liquid watercolor, and then pan watercolors. I'll use tape and paper to mask off the covers. I'm going to use a flat paintbrush to actually apply the paint to the edges. And then I'm going to use this press to keep the pages pressed together. I'm going to start by taping off the covers so I don't accidentally get paint anywhere I don't want it. I'm going to just use some copy paper to put around the edges and a little bit of washi tape to hold that down. I don't want to tape directly to the cover because I don't want the cover to rip. Going to keep applying some more washi tape and paper to fully cover the book, and then I will be right back. Now that I have my book cover completely taped off, I'm going to put it in the book press. I'm going to make sure that I get this lined up as well as possible and nice and tight. I'm using a press that I already had, so I'll just put it between these 2 pieces of wood, tighten it down. You could also stack it under some heavy books or weights. I've seen people use clamps too, but if you were going to use clamps, especially with a paperback, I would put something hard on either side just to keep the pages nice and tight together. I feel like this step is going to affect the watercolor results especially. I imagine with water potentially going down. So I'm going to be extra careful here, but for this book I'm going to start with acrylic. So again, I'll put this in the press, get it nice and clamped down, and then I will be back when I'm ready to start painting my edges with acrylic paint. I'm starting with acrylic paint because that's what I've seen most people use for this. I'm going to go with a solid color. I'm just using gray, and it's just a generic, inexpensive acrylic paint. I want to see how even the coverage is and how it feels going on. So I've got my book clamped in my press. It's going on pretty smooth, and I'm not using a ton of paint so that the pages don't glue to each other. I am noticing some flaking from the paper texture. I have seen some people sand their books before applying the acrylic paint, and so depending on how this experiment goes, I might try that next time. But for right now, I'm just going to paint one coat along this edge. So for all of these, I'm going to do the two shorter sides off camera, just because this is a little bit awkward of an angle to hold it to get along the edges. So I'm going to go ahead and do that off camera. I'll let it dry a little bit. I'll take this one out of the book press and I will be back with the next one to try our next paint experiment. And then at the end, we'll come back and compare all three of them together. Next is liquid watercolor. For this, I'm using Aqua Ink Graphics, so it's all watercolor ink. This one has me curious because it's so fluid. I'm going to apply it lightly and see if the water makes the pages warp or if the color goes on streaky. It's definitely lighter than acrylic. It spreads kind of nicely, but it's hard to drag it to fully spread the way that I could with the acrylic. I can already tell it might need multiple layers, or I'm just going to have to go back over some of the portions multiple times. So again, with the liquid watercolor, first thoughts, I like how even the coat seems to be. There's none of that flaky effect that I got with the acrylic, but it also did seem to stop moving very quickly. So as I applied more color, it would go ahead, color that area, and then I couldn't really spread it out the way that I could with the acrylic. And I am a little concerned that maybe it will have seeped down into the page. Just like the acrylic book, I'm going to go ahead and color the two sides off camera, and I will come back with the final book all prepared and in the book press for the pan watercolor. And finally, I'm trying pan watercolor, which is probably the least predictable here because the amount of water is going to vary so much. I watered it down a little bit with a spray bottle, and then I'm going to go ahead and brush it on gently onto the page. So you can see, similar to the liquid watercolor, it's hard to really blend it out compared to, again, the acrylic. It does spread a little bit more, but I think that's just the amount of water that I have right now on my pan watercolor. You can see as I'm getting down a little bit further where there's a little less water, it's becoming a little more difficult to spread out. So it'll be interesting to see how this one compares to the liquid watercolor where it's a more consistent amount of water. So similar to the other two, I'm going to go ahead and paint the sides, and then I will be back to compare all three of these. So everything is nice and dry now. I went ahead and let them all dry overnight. And now I'm going to see how all of the edges turned out. So here are the results. First one is the acrylic. So it is really smooth, but as you can see, I will have to pull apart each page. So I'll have to spend some time going through and doing that. And then you can see that there's a little bit of spots where it didn't quite take in the paint. These are older books, so it could have just been that the corners were a little rough. so they didn't quite blend in well. And like I said before, I have seen people go ahead and sand the edges. So probably the easiest to control for spreading the paint on, but definitely a lot of work that I'll have to do after the fact. Next one is my liquid watercolor. And this one is a lot easier to go ahead and fan the pages apart. I'm actually impressed that it didn't go down into the page very much, but you could kind of see on the edges when I move them that there's some spots where it was a little uneven. So I think this would need a second coat. It's a little bit better on the side edges, but still a little splotchy at places. It didn't warp as much as I was expecting. And for just needing a second coat, this really isn't bad. And then the last is my pan watercolor. This one was a little rough because I had to play around with the water and paint levels a lot. It also goes ahead and splits apart. Again, I'm impressed that there's not a lot of warping, but there's far more variation in the color than the liquid watercolor. So this would also certainly need at least a second coat. It was pretty difficult to get even, but I think it worked out pretty well. So overall, I think it depends what you're looking for an effect. I think I would go with the liquid watercolor, even with the little bits of imperfection, if I wanted to just do a nice solid edge. I think it's the easiest for post cleanup. Again, just need to do a second coat of paint. I do like that pan watercolors I have a lot of different tones of, but it is a lot softer. I think I would have difficulty layering up a design compared to a solid edge. And then acrylic, I think, might be a winner if I wanted to paint a detailed design. It would certainly take more work in the beginning, and then again, having to go through and split all of the pages. I'll probably do this while watching a show so that I can put this book back in a little free library along with the others. So I understand why people use it, because you've got so many color options, and it would layer nicely. But again, I think I would actually go with one of the watercolors unless I was doing a detailed design that really needed the acrylic. So this is my finished experiment. I really do love, for solid colors, the liquid watercolor the most. I think this would be the hardest, though, to do a lot of detail. My pan watercolor, I've got a bit more colors, but again, if you're trying to do a design, layering that might be difficult. And the acrylic, I think, would be the best if you had to do a more intricate design. Now I know at least what to expect if I decide to try out a pattern or a stamp or a more intricate design next time. Thanks for joining me for day 8 of Bookmas. If you've painted book edges before, let me know what medium worked best for you. And if you have any ideas for designs I should try next time, I'd love to hear them. I'll see you in the next video.